The scream reached the heavens, mixed with the sound of thunder, and a thin, shabby-dressed man looked at a woman over 50 years old. Chunky Time drilled the cruelty of experiences on her features and said, "Do something, sister. I feel like she's dying." Sister Venezuela looked at the woman expressionlessly, then with her hand, drew the sign of the cross on her body, muttered a faint prayer, and said, "The kid refuses to leave." The man caught the eyes of the man and grabbed the face of his wife, who is suffering the most agony moments, noticing her swollen belly due to contractions, and then directed his words to Sister Venezuela. "You are the most skilled native-born in all of Rome. Please act." Already she is the most skilled midwife of her time, so the church appointed her the head of the nursing caravan. She always uses her expertise in difficult cases and in the treatment of war patients. She said she was trying to figure out the reason why the child could not get off. "The umbilical cord is wrapped around the baby's neck. The more I paid, the more I choked." The clouds collided in the sky, so that the sound of thunder deafened the ears and took off from his awe. The man said with fear, "Please save her life, sister. She's suffering." She didn't answer him and looked towards the door of the dilapidated wooden house and said, "There's someone standing behind the door outside." He looked towards the door in amazement and said, "Who comes in such terrible weather?" There came a sound of strong, steady knocking on the door, and the sister looked at the tension and said, "Don't open the door." He marveled at her request and said, "For what?" Maybe he was a passerby asking for shelter. She grabbed the cross hanging from her neck with her palms in force and said, "Only the devil walks in such weather and does not fear death for himself." Strong and slow knocks were repeated. If this knocker was afraid of the severity of the storm, he would knock on the door quickly and fearfully, and not in such a slow, confident way. However, the man decided and got up, saying, "I'll see." Maybe he was a passerby. It was a brave decision, especially in that period of the Middle Ages, when the idea of the devil wandering at night during storms prevailed to trap the weak souls in his machinations. There is a law, and you should not break it for your own safety and the safety of your loved ones. Never open the door at night to passers-by, especially those who are braving the terrible weather and standing at the door of your own house are asking for shelter. But the man reassured himself about the presence of Sister Venezuela. She is one of the nuns, and the devil is definitely afraid of the church members. He opened the door a little and looked through the narrow opening. Darkness, wind, storm roar. A huge black-clad ghost standing 2 steps away from the wooden door is not very well seen. The man waited in silence for the stranger to speak, but he did not say a letter, so he decided to start. "Who are you?" The stranger said in a deep voice.
"A strange, homeless traveler."
He asked him, trying to control his trembling limbs, not knowing if it was from the cold or from fear, where to go. A minute's silence made the man realize that this stranger is not like the people he knows.
"Coming from there and going there and between there and there, I am here."
The man did not understand the meaning of the phrase, and thought that there were words that fell from his hearing because of the strong wind. The wooden door opened further and made room for the strange visitor to enter. Sister Venezuela's heart contracted immediately upon seeing him. A tall giant, wearing a black turban with a hood concealing the contours of his face. He stood in the middle of the room staring at the woman, whose screams and pain were overwhelming her being.
"Difficult childbirth."
Venezuela took a few steps back, grabbing the cross with more force and more fear. The man said, "How did you know?" The stranger advanced from the bed and stood on the head of the wife, who caught her gaze with pain, and said,
"I have experience in this field."
The man said, and his heart swells with hope that this stranger will save his wife from torment. "Are you a doctor?" He responded with his deep voice.
"You can say that."
The sister tried to check his features in the light of the torch coming from the corner of the house, but failed and said in a shrill voice, "There is hope if we hurry." The stranger went to the back of the bed and stood under the wife's foot and said,
"I don't do anything without a price."
The man went to an old box placed on a round table in the corner of the house and quickly opened it, took a few coins from it, and extended his hand to the stranger, saying, "That's all I have. Just help her, please." The stranger said without paying attention to him,
"The price is not money."
Sister Venezuela was worried. "This one is the devil himself, no doubt. You feel it so strongly." "The man, kneeling down at my feet," said the stranger, tears streaming from his eyes, accompanied by the screams of his wife. "Whatever you ask, I'll do it. I will be your servant all my life. Just saved my son and wife from death." The stranger pointed to the sister and said,
"I don't need it. Get out of the house, right now."
Venezuela looked at the pair, shaking her head left and right, mumbling, "Don't do that. This stranger is the devil himself. Do not obey his orders." The words played in the man's mind, but the cry of his wife, who competed with the thunder defeat, made him decide. If the survival of his wife and the only son he wished to see in the world before he died would be accomplished by the hands of Satan, he would welcome it. The church did not give him the solution anyway. "Get out." He said it sternly, and she said, "Get back in your head. You don't know this stranger, and you don't know what he wants from you." Ignoring her words, he got up from the floor and grabbed her by the forearm, leading her to the door. "You didn't offer any solutions, and neither did the church. And if this stranger is the devil himself, welcome, as long as he saves my family." And he threw her out the door into the storm, screaming, "You'll regret it. The church will not stand silent and will burn in a public square, you and your entire family. The Inquisition will not have mercy on you." She knocked on the door violently, screaming, "This stranger is a demon. Please don't fall for him. Satan will bring scourge and death on your head. Come to your senses, asshole." She didn't get an answer. Inside, the husband stood in the middle of the room waiting for what would be said, and the stranger spoke.
"Are you ready to pay the price?"
The man wiped his tears and said, "Whatever you ask for." The stranger smiled, but the man never saw his smile, even if he felt it. He stretched out his left hand and put it over the belly of the suffering woman. And here the man realized that this stranger is really only the devil himself. There are no humans with black hands ending in claws. Noticing that his wife's belly calms down and the contractions decrease, the stranger then landed with his hand between her feet, so that the baby rushed out, settled in his palm, screaming. The man could not believe himself, seeing his son come out to the world so easily, after hours of suffering and pain. He knelt down at the stranger's feet, crying, kissing them, muttering words of thanks. And the stranger said in his deep voice, it sounded like it was coming from a shed,
"And now, the price."
He walked, put the child on top of the table, took out of his clothes a strange silver knife, and the husband said with anxiety and tension, "What are you going to do?" The stranger cuts a small wound in the palm of the child, and then takes out a glass bottle, filling it with a few drops of blood. "I believed, Sister Venezuela. You are the devil." The stranger put the bottle inside his black clothes and left the child as he was, and walked towards the wooden door and said,
"I'm not the devil, but you didn't stray from the truth."
He opened the door and stood in the face of the strong wind, which rushed in steadily, and the husband shivered and got up quickly to take his son to him, before the cold wiped him out. And on the threshold of the door stood Sister Venezuela, trembling, and from under the black hood she saw the stranger's eye. A red eye is like the flame itself. He ignored her completely and walked away amid the storm. I entered the house and looked at the husband, the child, and the emaciated wife, who finally fell asleep due to fatigue and exhaustion. You don't know if I slept or allowed consciousness to leak out after the length and cruelty of the battle. She looked at the husband and said in a voice that came out trembling cold against her will, "What did you do, you wretch?" He didn't answer, and his eyes darted. He has no explanation, not at all.